Okay, wonderful. Wow, thank you guys so much for joining me this morning. This is going to be your professional practice orientation. And so for you guys that were all at residency, we went through kind of a very brief, if you remember, a very brief professional practice kind of intro to get you guys just thinking about professional practice and understanding what it is. So today we're going to go over it in much more detail. And feel free to take notes, but this will be recorded, and so you'll be able to go back and rewatch it. I will also put the PowerPoint presentation on the Mac portal, so you'll be able to view it. And then we have a professional practice manual with everything I'm going over today in a lot more detail. So don't feel stressed if you can't get it all retained today. But when we're talking about professional practice, what we're referring to is practicum and internship. And so that might be a little bit more familiar to you. Professional practice experience is what CACREP refers to when they're referring to practicum and internship. So we use that same language, but we will split those up when we're referring to one or the other. So you'll hear me talk about practicum, you'll hear me talk about internship, and then you'll also hear me talk about the professional practice experience as a whole. Okay. All right. This verse here, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I, comes from Psalm 61:2. I love this verse, and I choose to share this with you guys because this is what was on my background when I was in graduate school. So I went through the Master's of Arts in Counseling program at CCU as well. Graduated in 2013. And then afterwards went on to do my marriage and family certificate. And so I can relate to where you guys are at. I did not do an online program. Online program was not a thing when I was a student, but I still feel that I can kind of relate with you guys on what it's like to be a student taking all these classes and then, working a job and, living your personal life, and then trying to all of a sudden add in something called practicum and internship and trying to figure out how am I going to fit that into my schedule? What's that going to look like? It can be really easy to start to get overwhelmed. And I know that even today, as I give you guys a ton of information, it's going to start to feel overwhelming. But I just want to remind you guys that you're not in this alone. You remember already that you have your classmates who are in this with you, and obviously your faculty and staff. But you have someone much greater in it with you as well. And so just remember that, God is with you in this. And when you start to feel like you're becoming overwhelmed, just remember that, God is here, God is with you. We need to keep our eyes on him. So I'm going to open us up in prayer really quick, just to kind of set us up, hopefully for a good orientation this morning, and then we are going to just jump right in. Dear God, I just thank you so much for this day. I thank you for all of these students that are joining us online from wherever they're at. God, I thank you for the calling that you've put on each of their lives, and at least for right now, the calling that you've put on their lives to be at CCU. We know that you are going to use each of these students in different ways, but I'm just really excited because I'm excited for all the people that I know they're going to touch, whether that's through the counseling field or not. I know that they're going to touch people's lives, and to me, that's really exciting, God. I just pray that you would be with us this morning, that you would be with me and help me to present this information clearly to the students, that they would not feel so overwhelmed or anxious, God, but instead that they would feel prepared, and Lord, that they would just trust you with those anxieties that do kind of creep in here and there, God. I just pray that you would provide a professional practice site for each one of these students, and as they start this journey to thinking about next fall and start thinking about where they want to be and just what all that comes with, God, that you would just be preparing them and laying that path out for them. We thank you so much for who you are and all the things that you've done for us and all the things that you continue to do. And we just pray that we would glorify you in all things. We pray these things in your name. Amen. All right, let's jump in, guys. So Student competency review. I know this is a really fun way to start the presentation, but I think it's important. And this is probably already something that you're aware of, but I think it's important for us just to remind you that this is happening. So throughout your program at CCU, you are receiving ongoing assessment and competency review. That's a part of your academic and professional journey here at CCU. So we're watching, obviously we're watching your academics throughout, making sure that you're not ending up on probation or anything like that with your grades. But more than that too, we're really assessing your skills. Because we're a professional counseling program, it's really important to us that we make sure that we're doing our due diligence to not only protect you as a student, but to protect the people that you're potentially going to be working with one day. And so we do that through our gatekeeping courses. So you've already started those gatekeeping courses. Those are the courses that you'll take your entire first year in the program. Those are the courses that you're going to be watched and evaluated. So the things that we're evaluating you on or reviewing you on are going to be those counseling skills, therapeutic conditions, counseling dispositions, counseling behaviors, and like I said, your performance in your classes. And that's happening throughout the entire program, but there are formal reviews that are conducted by your faculty and staff after your first and second semesters. So you've already had an evaluation in your Skills 1 class. You might remember that you were evaluated with something called the CCSR. And that's an evaluation tool that we utilize throughout the entire time at CCU. So your faculty is using that tool to evaluate your counseling skills in Skills 1 and Skills 2. And then your site supervisors are going to use that when you're in your practicum and in your internship. So it's really nice because you as a student are able to take those evaluations and see your growth throughout your entire program. Now, if there was an issue, if there was a reason why we thought that, you were not quite where you needed to be, we would be talking about you in our student support committee. And so I sit on that student support committee, and that is a place, and it sounds exactly like it's named, it's a place for support. So faculty, staff, they bring students to that committee if they're concerned for any reason, and then we figure out a way to support you. So that's what we do. We kind of come up with a growth plan, and your faculty mentor then walks alongside you for the next 6 months, and we support you through it. And so I think it's important for you guys to know about this because we really want you to hear our heart that we really just want to support you while you're at CCU. It's really important to us that, if God called you to this field, that we want to make sure that we do whatever we can to support you in that calling. And so that's kind of what this committee is all about. And that's, something that you should be aware of. If for whatever reason you needed to be supported and on a growth plan, there could be potential for, holding you back from practicum or potential removal from the program. But it's really rare that those kind of things happen. Usually when somebody needs some extra support, they're provided that support, a student follows a growth plan, and then they're good to go after that. So, but that's kind of partially the evaluation process that we're doing is to either set you up for, needing support or just making sure that you're good to go along the way. Okay, so now that that's done with, let's talk more about professional practice. So like I said at the beginning of this presentation, when I'm referring to professional practice, I'm referring to practicum and internship. So this comes straight from CACREP. Practicum and internship is going to be that time where you are out in the field and you are going to be utilizing those counseling skills that you've been learning in the program under supervision. And so you're going to actually be working with real clients from, your community. So that's what professional practice is. That's what, we're referring to, and that's exactly why we're here today. So today we're going to be talking about practicum, internship, all the requirements and all the things you need to know to be getting ready for next fall. So you might remember at new student orientation at Res 1, I shared this timeline with you guys, and at the time you were at that red spot that said you are here. Well, good news, you guys have moved. You're no longer there. You're in that coursework now. You're taking all those gatekeeping classes. You're doing all that work to get to the next spot. So where we're going to be headed is to that practicum and internship spot where that arrow is pointing. But there's some things that you have to do before you get there. So we're going to talk about that today. So let's start with practicum. So practicum is what happens a year from now. So if you can kind of imagine a year from now, you guys will actually be in your practicum. You'll actually be halfway through your practicum by this point. So all of the students that are a year ahead of you, that's what they're doing right now. They just, I think, gosh, we might be in like what are we guys, week 8 or 9 or something like that. So students are already halfway through their practicum, and that's where you're going to be. It's going to be that first clinical experience with clients. So some of those prereqs for your practicum are listed here. These are going to be all your classes that you need to complete before you get there. But this isn't something for you to stress about, because as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're following your course progression and you're doing what your student service advisor says, you're gonna take the classes you need. You do have to pass these classes to move on. You can't just take them. But that part shouldn't feel too stressful. This is kind of already what you know. It's in your student planning. You're aware of it. There are some things, though, that you need to do that are outside of your degree plan. They're not in student planning, and they're not an assignment in any of your classes. So it's something you have to be responsible for on your own. And that is your 5 counseling sessions as a client and collecting professional liability insurance. Now, this has actually become easier than it has for students in the past, because now the way I understand it from the other students that I've been doing orientation with is that you guys have already been required to join ACA, or if you're a Colorado student, CCA. And so I understand that that's been a requirement in one of your classes. So if you're a student, for example, on this call right now that delayed practicum last year, you might not be aware, but that's a new requirement for new students. And so if you have joined ACA, or in Colorado CCA, these professional organizations, they provide professional liability insurance for students. So that's a really wonderful perk for you as a student when you join these associations, because that liability insurance is really the best liability insurance available to students. It's not necessarily the best coverage for a professional in the field. So once you graduate and you're working on your licensure hours, you might decide to purchase liability insurance elsewhere. But as a student, it really is the best coverage. And so if this is something that you're already being required to do in the program, then my recommendation would be just to continue that membership. Go ahead and make sure you renew it and just get your liability insurance through them. You can check to just make sure you have it by logging into your professional account, and then you should be able to go to your profile or something and see proof of liability insurance. So go ahead and check it out. Make sure it's there. Make sure that you do have that. If for whatever reason you don't, you'll want to contact them, because you should get that with your student membership. And so then you'll be able to just go ahead and submit that to me once you submit all your paperwork. And paperwork is due July 1st. I'm going to continue to say that over and over during this presentation, but we're going to talk about paperwork in detail in a little bit later in the presentation. But once you submit that paperwork, you can submit your proof of liability insurance with that. You also need these 5 counseling sessions as a client, and I know you guys already know this. This is something that you probably talked about even as early on in your interview, but that is something that you're required to do, is go to counseling for 5 sessions as a client. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So as of right now, we tell students you can begin your 5 counseling sessions, technically whenever you want. If you've already started those, that's great. If you're already in counseling, that's great. However, if you haven't started those counseling sessions, we really have been encouraging students to wait until after the start of their spring semester. And we've just really realized over the last handful of years that it seems that students just benefit from their counseling more when they wait until the spring. And I don't know if that's partially just because now they've kind of figured out what it means to be a graduate student at CCU. And so they kind of know a little bit more about what this whole counseling thing even looks like. Or if it also is because in the spring semester, you guys are taking some really tough classes. You're taking your crisis and trauma class, and you're taking social and cultural foundations. And it does seem to, those classes do seem to bring up a lot of things for students. And so we've found and just heard from previous students that they seem to get more out of their counseling sessions when they wait to start them in the spring. So that's our encouragement. My encouragement is to wait till then. But like I said, if you started them already or you're in counseling already, I'm not going to, not accept those counseling sessions just because you didn't wait. So that's kind of what we've encouraged students. Each session must be a minimum of 1 week apart. So you can kind of be thinking these counseling sessions are due with the rest of your paperwork. So these are due by July 1st. So you need to be, at least starting these by, sometime in May, because they do need to be 1 week apart. And some students might decide that they're going to space them out even more than that. So it's really up to you. It's up to you what you're looking for. And maybe you're looking at cost as well. So as long as they're a minimum of 1 week apart. The content of the sessions is obviously confidential. We do not need to know what you're talking about in your sessions. We just need verification that you attended. So part of your paperwork is getting a form filled out where your counselor signs off that you attended counseling on these dates. And so that's what we need. You do need to be going to a counselor that is licensed and currently in good standing with whatever state you reside. Okay, so this is something you can check on your state's licensing board website. You can make sure that they're holding a current license, that it's active, and that they're in good standing. And that's actually really good for you guys to kind of get into that practice of doing. You should be able to know how to get on there and check out counselors and their license. This is something you could do with your site supervisor as well when you get to that point. Okay, so the other thing to kind of keep in mind is that all 5 counseling sessions do need to be completed by the same counselor. And so if you go to a counselor and it's just not a good fit, we really want you to find a counselor that's a good fit for you so you get the most out of your sessions. So you might decide to look for another counselor at that point, but then you will need to complete 5 sessions with that person. So you might end up with more than 5 sessions if you are kind of counselor shopping. And then at this point, teletherapy is not going to meet the requirement for those 5 counseling sessions. We really want you to go and sit down face-to-face with a counselor. Okay, let's talk a little bit about practicum and actually what this means and what it's going to look like for you guys. So like I said before, you're going to do practicum in the fall semester. So a year from now, that's where you're going to be at. And really, you're going to learn today that practicum and internship are really similar. The biggest difference is going to be the hour requirement. They're the same thing as far as duties and responsibilities and the things you can and cannot do. So this can get confusing for students and even sometimes sites because of the reason, because of how KCREP refers to them as practicum and internship. Some schools have practicum on site. So some students are at schools where they're doing practicum at their university. We obviously don't offer that, and we have students all over the United States, so we can't even offer that. And so really what you need to know and what sites need to know when you're talking with them is that it's just the experience that comes before internship. It's the first experience in the professional practice experience, but you're not, it's not like a beginning thing. It's not like you're not able to do things that you'll be able to do once you get to internship. They really just blend together as one experience. So the difference, though, is the requirement in hours. So with practicum, you're required to collect 100 total hours. So these are hours that you're collecting on site. So let's just say, for example, you end up doing your practicum and internship at a community mental health center. Okay, so these are 100 hours that you're completing with this community mental health center. Now, they're broken up between direct and indirect. And the indirect hours I'm going to talk about here in a second, but those can be collected through a variety of ways. And sometimes you're even collecting those when you're not on site, like at the community mental health center, for example. The direct hours, however, those are all done on site because those are your hours that are direct clinical contact hours, okay? So those activities can include assessment, counseling, psychoeducational activities, and consultation. Now that's what CACREP states as direct clinical contact hours. So that's what we utilize when we're looking at that definition. That's what we share with our site supervisors as well. But we also really leave some freedom when it comes to site supervisors to be able to determine with you what can count as a direct hour. So as long as it involves that interaction with clients, you can probably count it as a direct hour. The following would be indirect hours: observing others, providing counseling or related services, record keeping, admin duties, and clinical and or administrative supervision. So anytime you're at the site doing things for your site, you might be answering phones, you might be doing some sort of scheduling, you might be doing admin activities, you're going to be doing case notes, treatment planning, researching for your clients. All of that counts as indirect hours. Indirect hours can also be counted off-site. So, you might be reading a book for one of your clients who has anxiety and you need to read up on that. That could count as indirect hours. So when you're prepping for your work with your clients, that's indirect hours. Maybe on a Saturday, you go to a training, an all-day training, on motivational interviewing. You could count those hour for indirect hours. So indirect hours are going to come quickly. Students don't have any trouble getting those. You're also counting all your supervision and your practicum class time as indirect hours. So just like you're in, you're a theories class at CCU, you're going to be in a practicum class at CCU and an internship class. So next fall, you're going to register for your practicum class to kind of go along with your field experience that you're doing. And so you're going to meet with your practicum class for an hour and a half every week. And that hour and a half is going to count towards indirect hours. Okay, so those hours are going to come, like I said, pretty easily. It's those direct hours that sometimes can be a little bit slower for students, especially with practicum, because you're building up your caseload in the beginning. So you're not going to walk in likely with 10 plus clients. You're going to maybe, not get one for the first week or two. And then maybe week 3, they say, okay, we're going to assign you to one client. And then week 4, we're going to assign you to another. So it can feel slow in the beginning. So you need to be really diligent on tracking your hours and making sure you're getting what you need. Because in practicum, you have one semester to complete these 100 hours. Okay? And if for whatever reason you're not able to get your hours completed in that semester, then you're not able to pass practicum to move on to internship. And practicum happens once a year. So if you don't get what you need for practicum, you're delayed a year, unfortunately. And I tell you not to scare you. It's really important that you know that, because it's going to be your responsibility to be watching your hours. But it's not something that happens often with our students. I mean, most of our students are moving on to internship. If I have one student that doesn't move on to internship, it's usually because something was going on in their life that caused them to not be able to attend, their practicum site and get their hours. But I do have some students who, this time maybe the semester start realizing that they're not getting what they need at their site. And so they're having to add a second site or something of that nature. So, it's one of those things that every student has to watch their hours, make sure they're getting what they need, advocating for themselves, having conversations with their supervisors, having conversations with their faculty or myself, and then we figure out what we need to do to make sure that they get what they need. But like I said, the majority of our students are going to pass practicum, move on to internship here in the spring. Okay, so something else to be keeping in mind, this is with practicum and with internship, but we'll talk about it here, is that you do need to be able to audio or video record at least 1 or 2 sessions for your class. And this is every semester that you're going to have to do this. So you're going to be looking for a site that's going to allow you to do the audio or video recording. Now, the way we really prefer it is we prefer that you get the video recording first. If that's not an option, then audio recording would be the next option. And then third, if that's still not an option, the third option would be a live observation. So that'd be where your supervisor is sitting in on a session with you and watching you and filling out an evaluation tool on you. But we would much prefer you get your audio or video. You guys have recorded yourself now since you've been in Skills 1, so hopefully you're already seeing the benefit of watching yourself back as a counselor. And so really this is for you. But it's also a wonderful way to make sure you're not missing things with your client, to be able to watch back those sessions. And then to be able to bring that to your practicum class. Your practicum class acts very much like group supervision. So you bring that and present that, and the fellow students, classmates in there are going to be giving you feedback as a counselor, and they're going to probably be giving you some thoughts and ideas about your client as well. So obviously, this is something your side has to agree to, and this is something the client has to be able to sign off on as well, that they understand they're being recorded. This isn't usually a problem. I have a handful of students every year that aren't able to do the audio video, and so they do the live observation, but that's a handful of students out of 175 students. So it's usually not an issue for students to be able to get this done. Okay, last thing we'll kind of talk about when we're talking about practicum is I'll briefly talk about supervision here. So you're required to collect an hour, or excuse me, you're required to collect 14 hours of individual or triadic supervision during the semester. This is for every semester. So this is for practicum and internship. This requirement does not change. So that's usually, for most students, that looks like an hour every week of supervision. And for those of you who aren't really sure what supervision looks like, what that really means is you would be meeting with your site supervisor face-to-face for an hour each week, sitting down, talking about your cases and your clients. You might be watching some of your video. It's like a case consultation time. Might be some education time. Maybe your supervisor bringing you some education and talking through some things with you. So it's set aside time with you and your supervisor to be able to talk through your clients and your cases. This is either going to have to be one-on-one or two-on-one. So it could be 2 students to 1 supervisor. Any more students than that, though, is considered group supervision. And you're welcome to attend group supervision and collect hours of group supervision, which would be towards your indirect hours, but it won't meet your individual supervision requirement. So you always need to be getting 14 hours a semester of individual supervision. And then, like I said before, you'll also count your hour and a half of class time a week. Okay. So that's kind of the basic requirements of practicum. We're going to talk about internship here in a second, and you're going to find that it looks very similar. So internship is an experience that lasts for a minimum of 2 semesters, but sometimes for 3. And so students are collecting at this point a total of 600 hours. And like I said, it's a minimum of 2 semesters, but sometimes students will do that for 3. So if you can kind of imagine, you guys are going to go into practicum in fall of 2019. And then in the spring of 2020, you're going to do spring and summer semesters of internship and possibly the fall semester. Okay. You guys are all going to walk that following spring, so spring of 2021. So even if you do 3 semesters of internship, it doesn't delay you. You're still taking classes through that entire year. And sometimes even, we have maybe just a small handful of students that do a 4th semester of internship. And this is really all just based on you as a student, your schedule, what you can, commit to each semester, and also your site, depending on what they are able to provide to you. So I would say the majority of our students are doing 2 to 3 semesters, though. It's really rare that we have a student do a 4th semester. So your prereqs to get into internship look exactly like practicum, except for you also have to successfully complete practicum. So like I said before, you have to complete those 100 hours before you can go into your internship. So internship is a total of 600 hours. They're split up very similar to practicum with that kind of 40-60 split. So you need a minimum of 240 direct client hours. Again, those are your, counseling, assessment, any client contact that you have, those are your direct hours. And then the remainder are indirect hours. So I didn't say this for practicum, but this is true for practicum or internship. If you get more direct hours than you're required, that's just less indirect hours that you need. And then you are required to collect 10 hours of leading or co-leading a counseling group, and that could be in either practicum or internship. And then your site supervision is just the same as practicum, you guys. 14 hours of individual or triadic site supervision each semester. So you'll see, really practicum and internship, they look very similar. The requirements are very similar except for the number of hours just increases. So, when sites are asking, sometimes sites think they're going to have to do a little bit more hand-holding in practicum, which in some ways is true because it's your very first experience with clients. Your responsibilities are the same. So that's, I think, a nice thing is that you've done all your gatekeeping classes, you've done all your core classes by the time you get to practicum. So really, we feel that you're really prepared by the time you get to practicum to be sitting with clients. So hopefully, if sites have questions about that and what that looks like or the differences between those, you can hopefully explain that to them. But if not, and they're still wanting to further explore that, you can always direct them to me. Okay. I know you guys probably have some questions, but jot those down and we'll get to those at the very end. So searching for a site. So this is your responsibility as a student to find and secure your own professional practice site. Here in Colorado, students have maybe some sort of an advantage because we work with a lot of sites, the same sites over and over and over. But a lot of you guys are outside of Colorado, outside of Denver, and so you guys really know the mental health services in your area better than we do. And so, we want you to be out there searching and getting an idea of what's available. You're going to treat this very much just like a job. This is going to be a job for you when you're in this time in your program. And so, be thinking about this now. I know we kind of shared with you guys at Res 1 just to kind of keep it in the back of your head. Now we're saying, okay, this is time to start really thinking about it. And you're probably going to start interacting with sites, after the new year then. But this is the time where you're going to really start Google searching, mental health services in your area. You're going to start networking with other people that, maybe there's other students that live in your area. Feel free to even, I've had students check in with me and find out, is there a student that was in the program before me, that lives in this area, and I'm happy to check and see if that student is willing to talk with you. I'm happy to look and see if we've worked with sites in your area in the past, but really you're going to be better off web searching and networking with people, networking with faculty and networking with professionals in your community, networking with people at your church, finding out from other mental health providers. So other people who, are in private practice is a good place to go too. Talking to your counselor that you go to, but then asking other private practice clinicians, where do you send clients for higher level of care? Because that is likely a place that needs student interns. Those places, those community mental health services, and the larger hospitals, inpatient or partial inpatient, community mental health that are outpatient, those places usually run on student interns. They need you guys to run their clinics. So those are good places to start. And then obviously you can get creative. There's so many mental health services in Denver that I'm not even aware of that students end up finding for us. So get creative and start searching and just getting a feel for what is available in your area. And then really, I would say after the new year is when you're probably going to want to start contacting some of these places. And you're going to want to find out, do they have an internship program? Some of these places are going to have everything outlined on their website, and they're going to be super organized, and they're going to say, here's the application process. Applications are due at this time of year. interviews are going to happen at this time of year. So that's great. Some of them are not going to be quite as organized. And they, you might take a couple phone calls and emails to track somebody down to figure out what's going on and what they offer. But it's worth pursuing because remember, these sites, sometimes they can't afford like a clinical coordinator, or they can't, an intern coordinator, or they can't even afford somebody to work the front desk. And so you're calling, and you're sometimes calling a counselor. So they might be in sessions. And so it might just take a little bit of persistence to get a hold of somebody to find out, what their internship program looks like and what their deadlines are, so that you're aware. Some of these sites are just going to say, send me a resume and a cover letter. Some sites are just going to have a simple application. It just is going to look different. Every site does it differently. So I would say start Google searching, start making a list of sites you're interested in now, and then after the new year, maybe start contacting some of those places to figure out what the deadlines look like so you know. And then a lot of them, April, May, some of them March. So maybe March, April, May. That time of year is like probably when most of the sites are doing, taking applications and doing their interviews for fall. Briefly, we'll touch this, and then if this is you, you can contact me. We can talk more one-on-one. But some of you might be in a place where you're working in like some sort of mental health field, and you're hoping to do your professional practice experience at your place of employment. So if that's you, ACA says you must meet the 3 2s, and those are that you must have 2 separate supervisors, be doing 2 separate roles, and be in 2 separate locations. So maybe you work at a hospital and you work in the billing department, and that's, on the east wing or something of the hospital. But you want to do your practicum and internship in the mental health part of the hospital. So that would probably work because you would be in 2 separate locations. You'd be doing 2 different roles, and you would likely have 2 different supervisors, because whoever supervises you for your employment and billing probably doesn't supervise the mental health practicum and internship students. So that would be an example of where it would probably work. Sometimes this can get tricky, especially when we're looking at the 2 separate location piece. So like I said, if this is something that you're interested in or you think might work for you, contact me one-on-one and we can talk through that. Okay, let's talk about site supervision. Part of getting a site approved is making sure your supervisor is approved as well. And so that third bullet point, that bigger paragraph, this comes straight from CACRET. This is what they say a site supervisor must have. So they must have a minimum of a master's degree in counseling or related profession with equivalent qualification. So, they got their degree in their master's in counseling or social work or marriage and family or some sort of psychology, something like that. Then they must have a relevant license in their state. So because we're working with students all across the United States and sometimes outside the United States, this is a little tricky. It's not super tricky, but I can't just tell you these are the licenses that they need to have. I could tell you the licenses in Colorado that work, but what I've learned since I've been in this position is most states are somewhere, along the lines of an LPC, licensed professional counselor, or they might call it a licensed professional clinical counselor, so it might be like an LPCC. In the state of Colorado, however, an LPCC does not work because that's a candidate. But a licensed clinical social worker usually will work, or a marriage and family therapist usually will work. So each state is different, and so I don't have a list of licenses that work. You'll just have to find out what are the counseling license, those professional counseling licenses in your state. And they have to have done a minimum of 2 years of counseling to obtain that license. So that's how we've really determined, which licenses will work. So you can search that as well. I'm going to look a lot of that up for you when you turn in your paperwork, but we have we have a lot of students, as you guys know, that are going to be submitting paperwork to just me. So the more research that you can do on your end, the better. So getting on your state licensing board and looking at what are the requirements to get this license. What did they have to do? Did they have to have a master's? Did they have to do at least 2 years of counseling? Okay, then they probably are going to meet the requirements for CCU. They also have to have a knowledge of your program expectations, requirements, and evaluation procedures, which you are going to provide a lot of that to them. Part of your job is being educated and knowing what you need as a student, and then being able to tell the supervisor what you need and what they need to know. And then another big piece of that is going to come from me. When they start the fall semester with you, they're going to be required to attend or watch a recording of an orientation. So I'm going to hold an orientation for all of our site supervisors. I'm also going to provide them counseling supervision training, because KCREP requires that they have training in counseling supervision, and not all states even require that counselors have training and supervision to supervise. So we provide that, and it is required. So orientation, for example, is going to last, 45 minutes to an hour. And then we have a training counseling supervision video that we ask all of our supervisors to watch, and it's like 16 minutes. So we've really kept it short. We try to keep everything super concise, because we know that these counselors are really busy, and that, taking on a student to supervise is a big task. And then when we ask them to do additional things, sometimes that's not really, they don't really want to do all these extra tasks. So we try really hard to keep it super concise for them, so that it's not a lot of extra work. But they will be required to either attend or watch the recording of orientation, and then to watch the training counseling or the supervision training video. You guys will be really encouraged to look up your site supervisors as well. Like I was saying before, you can do that with your counselor. Same thing with your site supervisor. Look them up. Make sure they have an active license. See if they have any grievances on them. And if they do, check out what those grievances were and see if they had anything to do with supervision. This has happened before, where I've looked up a site supervisor for a student and seen that they were grieved because of some supervision stuff that was going on. So it's good for you to know that. That way there's no big surprise whenever you turn the paperwork into me. Or if you do see that, you might let me know right away, hey, I saw this on their license. I don't know if it's going to be a deal breaker or not. And then I can be looking at that for you as well. Something that you're going to need from them is a copy of their resume or their CV and a copy of their license. So you're going to need to get that and then submit that to me. And I'll kind of show you where you're going to submit that as far as paperwork and timeline goes here in a second. You guys are all over the United States. You guys all have different requirements when it comes to what you need to get licensed. So as you guys already know, we've probably been hounding this into you as a student at CCU, but it's really your responsibility to know what your educational and licensure requirements are in your state. So make sure you've done that. I think you guys have already had to do this in one of your classes, but make sure you're really aware. If you know that you reside in a state that requires more hours and during internship than what we require of you, then that's really important that you know that, and that you're able to collect those hours so that you don't graduate and then have to come back. So I think, for example, like Indiana, they require more hours during internship than what we do at CCU. So students are just required then to collect more so that they meet those educational requirements when they go to get their license. Same thing with licensure. You need to know what your state is going to require of you. You might be residing in one state, but you plan on getting licensed in another. So do your research, make sure you know what the requirements are, and know too that they change. So keep up on that information. It's really important that you're informed. Okay, let's talk about this application process. So you've heard me say now a couple times that there's an application, there's paperwork, there's forms, there's all these things, and they're due at a certain time of the year. So let's talk about those, and then I didn't pull it up yet, but I will pull it up and I'll show you guys where these forms can be found. I'm going to go ahead and go to this next slide here. this is not the prettiest of timelines, but hopefully it kind of gives you a picture of what your responsibilities are, because this seems to be confusing for students. So I tried to make this as clear as possible. So that first box says individual searches for site. So this is when you are looking for your site, okay? So let's say you're searching, you find yourself a site, you've interviewed there, they want you to be there. Great. So then what do you have to do? You need to submit paperwork to me, and all your paperwork to me is due by July 1st. If you look down, the arrow that goes down, this box right here at the bottom is the paperwork that you need to submit to me by July 1st. So it's going to be the professional practice application and individual counseling verification form. That's a really long title, but basically that's that form that your counselor is signing off saying that you did attend counseling sessions as a client. That's one form. The second form is called the professional practice site summary form. That is the form that you can bring with you when you go to interview at these sites, because it's going to have really good information on there for you. It has all the basic requirements listed for practicum, internship, and supervision. And I'll show that form to you. But anytime you need a site to get approved, you need that form to be submitted. So if you're looking at 2 sites, for example, then you'll submit 2 site summary forms. And the third thing is your professional liability insurance that we talked about. So those 3 things are due by July 1st, okay? Then you're gonna wait on approval from me. So I'm gonna review that application and then give you approval. Usually that comes in the form of an email that just says everything looks great. You can move forward with a contract. Now, remember, I mean, we have all of you online students and all of our Lakewood and Colorado Springs in-seat students. You know, so we have a lot of students submitting paperwork. So you can do this before July 1st. I mean, you know, you start searching in February, March, maybe you interview and get accepted April, May. Feel free, submit your things in as soon as you can. That's just going to help this process move along smoothly. So once you receive approval from me, then I'm going to say everything looks great. You can go ahead and move forward with a contract. So we provide the contract. It's also on our MAC portal, and I'm going to show that to you guys. But you're going to then go back to your site, get this contract filled out with the site, and then you're going to collect the site supervisor's resume and license, and that is due to me by August 1st. Okay? So you have 2 deadlines to remember. July 1st is when all your application type paperwork is due, and then August 1st is when your contract and your site supervision information is due. At that point, then, you guys are waiting on an approval letter. So this is going to come in the form of a PDF. It's going to be an official letter. Once you get that, that's when you're ready to start practicum. Until you have that, you are not officially approved to start your practicum. Okay, so that's what this paperwork process looks like. Oh yes, and then once you get my approval letters, you are good to go and you can begin changing those lives 1 client at a time in practicum. The internship application process looks a little different. So most of you guys are going to sign a contract for practicum and internship. You're going to get approved to be at this one site, and that's where you're going to stay. You're going to be there, you know, from that August time until the following August or that following December, and you're going to sign that contract for both practicum and internship. So if that's the case, you're not going to need to submit anything else to me at this point. You're going to be good to go for your entire professional practice experience. Now, if you have a supervision change, then you're going to need a new contract. So anytime there's a supervisor, guys, there's a contract. So if for whatever reason your supervisor changes, maybe they go on maternity leave or they leave completely and you know you have a switch in supervision, that's fine, but we will need a new contract. So most of you guys aren't going to need to submit paperwork for internship per se, but some of you guys might. And so those cases would be somebody who is going to add another site come January, come internship, or somebody who secured a site just for practicum and then they're going to go somewhere else for internship, which that does happen. It's not as common because most sites don't want to just take you for practicum, but every once in a while students will do that. But usually what happens is I have students who are adding a second site. And so if that's the case, or if you're changing sites for internship, then all I need from you is a new professional practice site summary form, because remember I told you anytime you need a site approved, you need a site summary form. And then you wait for my approval, and then I'll tell you to go ahead and get your contract in place. So it's very similar. It's just a little simplified because I don't need, you know, some of the other forms again. But like I said, most students don't do this. I'm only, like right now is the time of year I might be receiving some of this stuff for students. And I have like a small handful of students who are submitting paperwork for internship. The rest of the students are good to go. They signed their contract for both practicum and internship, and so I don't even have to worry about them. Okay, so let's go ahead and look really quick at where you can find these forms. We just have a few more slides, you guys, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Okay, so you're going to go to my.ccu.edu. You're going to sign in with your CCU login. Most of you have probably been here at least a time or two. It's probably not the place you come to regularly. Okay, this took me straight to the MAC portal, so I'm going to back it up for a second so you guys can see how to get here. So once you sign in to my.ccu.edu, it's going to bring you to this home page. Okay, then you're going to hover over the academics tab. I'm just going to click on it because my computer's being a little slow. Okay, so if you click on the academics tab, then you're going to click on College of Adult and Graduate Studies. And then you're going to choose MA Counseling. And this is going to bring you to the MAC portal. Okay, this is a good place for you guys to be aware of if you aren't already. Your student service advisor information is listed here. When you get to the point where you're ready to take comprehensive exams and the national counseling exam, information will be listed here for you. And then you're going to see there's all these like little sections there, usually in tabs. It's not loading 100% correctly. So these sections are different things. So announcements, for example, so you guys, your residency dates are here if you weren't aware. And then documents, professional practice, and then important web links. So we're going to look at the professional practice information, okay? So your manual is here. When you guys submit one of your forms, you're signing off that you have read and you understand the professional practice manual. So it's important for you guys to know this stuff, guys. This is the 2018-2019 manual. By the time you get to practicum, there's going to be a new one. There should not be any huge changes, but there is always some sort of changes. So make sure you guys are keeping up with that information. And then I'm just going to pull up the forms really quick that we talked about. So the professional practice application and individual counseling verification form. Let's pull that up real quick. I say really quick, but I don't know how quick my computer will be. So this is going to be the, like I said before, this is the form that your individual counselor is going to sign saying that you've attended your 5 counseling sessions. I might pull these up differently for you guys just so that I don't have to wait on the internet each time. I might just pull them up from my computer. But this is where they're listed, and I wanted you guys to at least see where they are so that you know how to get to them. Okay, so there's this one. So this is the application and individual counseling verification form. These forms are really nice, you guys. I feel like hopefully I've designed them so that they are really easy to use and have good information. So you're gonna see right away, I'm gonna list all the information I just told you. So I already list the due date for your paperwork, so there's really no reason for you to not know when it's due. And then I list the process so that you guys don't forget what's happening. So all that's listed for you. So that you don't forget, and that so you don't have to remember everything. because you guys have a lot that you're trying to keep in your brain. So hopefully this helps. And then I list out all the things that you need. Okay. And then you're going to have your counselor sign this part of the form. And then you're signing it down here. And this is the form I was telling you that you're signing, saying that you have met the above requirements and that you have read and understand the manual. Okay. So that's the professional practice application. Let's pull up the professional practice site summary form. Just give it 1 second. Okay. So this is a professional practice site summary form. This is the one I said would be great for you to bring with you to a site because it has all the basic requirements listed on here for you. So when you're there meeting with a potential site supervisor or whoever you're meeting with at that time, you don't have to try to remember everything. So you're going to list your site, their website, a phone number, and who you met with. Is this your place of employment? Yes or no? That helps me to know if you're going to need to get some additional paperwork, because if you are doing it at your place of employment, there's more paperwork to fill out. And then these are the practicum and internship basic requirements. The one thing oh yes, it is on here. I did add that, your ability to tape sessions. So most everything you're going to need to meet is going to be listed here. So that's really nice. And then it also lists all your site supervision requirements. So the supervisor requirements, along with that they have to attend an orientation and a training video. So that's all there too. And then you'll put the professional practice supervisor information here. Usually you're able to get this information right away. Sometimes you might be at a site where they're not sure who they're going to place you with yet. So don't let that delay you. You can still submit this and then just let me know, that they haven't decided who your site supervisor is going to be. We can at least get the site approved, and then we can get the site supervisor approved, later on with the contract. So if we can get this information, that's great, and that's going to be better, and it's just going to help us move forward more seamlessly. But if for some reason you're not able to get your paperwork turned in on time, and just let me know what's going on. Okay, and then that third piece, remember, you submit these 2 forms I just showed you, and the third thing is going to be, whoops, what's going on here? The third thing is going to be your professional liability insurance. Okay. The last form I want to show you is your professional practice contract. So you remember I said that once you get approval from me, I'm going to tell you to go ahead and move on with your contract. This is the contract. It's a 4-page document. It's got really good information on it that you need to read because you're signing off on this. Again, it has those most basic requirements listed. And then it's going to have the roles and responsibilities of the faculty member who's teaching your practicum or internship class, your professional practice site, and your supervisor, and then you. So make sure you read this because you're going to be signing off that you agree to all these things. And then you're going to have this section where you list the start and end dates of your contract. So these are going to always be the start and end date of semesters, guys. So you can remember it that way. You're going to this is always going to start in the fall semester when you fill this contract out. And then your end date is going to be depending on when you're ending. Like I said, if you're doing just practicum, or if you're doing practicum and internship, if you're doing the minimum of 2 semesters of internship, or if you're doing 3, this end date can be kind of flexible as long as you're having open lines of communication with your site. You might sign it for the minimum of 2 semesters of internship and then realize you need a 3rd semester. We can adjust this on our end. Just make sure you're having those really open lines of communication with your site. Okay, so you fill this out. The hours per week is between you and the site. We don't really care how many hours you're there. It's more for you and the site to know. Then your site supervisor fills out all their information here and signs it. You fill out your information and sign it. There's some site information that goes here. And then the last thing down here is going to be my signature. Okay, so you get this entire document needs to be filled out before it's sent to me. You send this to me with the site supervisor's resume and license by August 1st. Okay. So that's the paperwork I wanted to show you guys. Okay. Time to track. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, you guys, because I want to be really honest with you that this is what we're using to track hours for students right now. We might be using this when you get to practicum next year, or we might be using something else. Sometimes it's hard to say. We are always looking at, the best programs out there for students. But what I can tell you is that no matter what, you're going to use some sort of online tracking program that you are already paying for in your course fees. So it's not going to be an additional cost. You don't need to be planning ahead for that. But you're going to use some sort of online tracking system that allows you to track your hours, and then allows your site supervisor to have an account where they can approve the hours. So right now we do use Time to Track, and students track their hours there. Site supervisors approve them. Faculty verifies them. I can see everything as well. And we also use Time to Track to do all of our evaluations. So you will either be using this or something similar. Okay. Before we get to questions, I just want to take literally, 5 more minutes here for a second to talk to you guys, and just to read you guys something. And then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then I'm going to open it up for questions for you guys. But I know I just threw a ton of information at you and it probably feels kind of overwhelming, and you guys have questions, and I'm going to answer all those for you. But I just want to take a second to read something to you guys, if that's okay. So I did my certificate, I said, in marriage and family therapy after I graduated from CCU. And in that program, I did a play therapy class. And in that class, my faculty read this portion of the Velveteen Rabbit to us. And it always really, really stuck out to me. And in particular, this one part, and you can see this quote here on the screen. And so I want you guys, when I'm reading this for a second, just to be thinking about the process that the Velveteen Rabbit is talking about, and how that can relate to you as clinicians, and how it can relate to the clients that you guys are going to be seeing. So this is how we're going to end our presentation, and then I'll open it up for some questions. There once was a Velveteen Rabbit, and in the beginning he was really splendid. He was fat and bunchy as a rabbit should be. His coat was spotted brown and white. He had real thread whiskers, and his ears were lined with pink sateen. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. There were other things in the stocking, nuts and oranges and a toy engine and chocolate almonds and a clockwork mouse. But the rabbit was quite the best of all. For at least 2 hours the boy loved him, and then aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of tissue paper and unwrapping of parcels, and in the excitement of looking at all the new presents, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten. For a long time he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about him. He was naturally shy, and being only made of velveteen, some of the more expensive toys quite snubbed him. The mechanical toys were very superior and looked down upon everyone else. They were full of modern ideas and pretended they were real. The model boat, who had lived through 2 seasons and lost most of his paint, caught the tone from them and never missed an opportunity of referring to his rigging in technical terms. The rabbit could not claim to be a model of anything, for he didn't know that real rabbits existed. He thought they were all stuffed with sawdust like himself, and he understood the sawdust was quite out of date and should never be mentioned in modern circles. Even Timothy, the jointed wooden lion, who was made by the disabled soldiers and should have had broader views, put on airs and pretended to be connected with government. Between them all, the poor little rabbit was made to feel himself very insignificant and commonplace, and the only person who was kind to him at all was the Skin Horse. The Skin Horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath, and most of the hairs at his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away. And he knew that they were only toys and would never turn it into anything else. For nursery, magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the skin horse, understand all about it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender before Nana came to tidy the room. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the skin horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up?" he asked, "or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the skin horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been lopped off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you're real, you can't be ugly except to the people who don't understand." I sit with clients as my part-time job. So I'm here full-time, and then I have a practice that I work with. And still, every time I sit with clients, I am really amazed that God chose me to sit across from people and be a part of their process. I really feel like it's such a privilege. And I hope you guys feel that too. I mean, you guys are so privileged that God called you to be in this field, and really sitting across from clients and watching them go through this process essentially of becoming real, right? It's becoming, and it's not always easy, and it doesn't happen all right away, and it kind of hurts along the way. It's such a privilege for you, but you're kind of going along that process as well. And that's something I've learned, is that it's not just about the client's process, but it's about ours too. And you're becoming real during that process as well. And so I just wanted to remind you guys of that and tell you to give yourself grace. I know that this is a lot, and that, I mean, honestly, this portion of your program is probably the most stress-inducing portion of the program for most students. Finding a site sometimes causes the most stress for students, and I can just feel and hear the relief in them when they finally secure their site. And so I know how difficult this process can be, and I know that a lot of stress can come along with it, but it's also such a privilege, you guys. And so I know it's going to be worth it for you guys, and I'm here to walk alongside you. I know there's a lot of you and there's only one of me, but it really is my desire to be able to walk alongside each and every one of you if I can. And so as you guys have questions and as you guys begin to feel stressed or overwhelmed, first of all, remember you have a God who is greater than all of this, but I'm here too, and I'm happy to answer your questions or just sit and chit chat with you if you need a little chit chat to kind of de-stress and decompress what's going on inside your brain. So I'm going to leave you guys with that, and I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'll go ahead and just stop the recording so we can spend as much time as we need on the questions.